subjects. Tonight our subject is awakening divine healing energy, which is, of course, an enormously interesting and important subject on many different levels. So many people nowadays, I'm very interested how many people have an inclination toward healing in one way or another. Either it comes out of our own disharmony, and there's a feeling of the necessity to heal ourselves, or else it comes out of our compassion for the people around us. But there's also just sort of this other force that I find most interesting. I've been involved in spiritual thinking since the mid-60s, late 60s. So that's quite a long time. And it's long enough in the expanding awareness of the planet to really have watched all these different, how things have really developed. When we first started, as I often say, we were either the cutting edge or the lunatic fringe, just depending on how you wanted to identify it. I preferred myself to be the lunatic fringe. That was just more enjoyable to me. But I've really watched how many things that our little coterie of, hippies or graduated hippies, whatever we were, in America at that time, so many different movements in that country were started by that kind of weird break from tradition, which seemed so natural to us when we were doing it. Organic foods and whole foods and, of course, meditation. I joke about it now that not everybody meditates yet, but many more people feel guilty because they don't, which seems to me like real progress. At least we've gotten to the point where we know we're supposed to be doing it, whether we're doing it or not. But it's all part of the same shift of understanding. I hope all of you can come tomorrow night when we show the movie about Ananda. It's also free, so you're more than welcome to come. And one of the speakers in that film, we did a documentary about Ananda as a feature film, because documentaries can be a little dry. So we made up this very thin plot of a reporter coming out to find out about our community, and then everything she finds is what's really there. And one of the speakers who, he's written about the future of consciousness, really. And he's just talking about over the last years, decades, there's been greater and greater awareness of the potential of our own interior energy. That we've just been thinking more in terms of energy, and more we're thinking about how that energy reacts within us, how it comes from us, and all the different things we can do. And so many movements, starting with meditation, as an example, are just all about, if I work with my inner self and my inner energy first, a great deal of what I want to have happen in the world follows in a much simpler manner. And there's also this growing awareness of how things could be or how things ought to be. Well, actually, there's two things that are happening if we talk about the planet as a whole right now, which is things are getting unbelievably worse, just stunningly worse. New Zealand blissfully is way down here at the bottom, and it's like, you haven't been noticed yet. And I'm sure you all incarnated down here because it's an island haven to a very large extent. I thought it was much farther away than it actually is. I was amazed how quickly I could get here on an airplane. I don't know, I thought it was just way, way over there somewhere. It's closer than India, among other things, but to where we live. But in other parts of the world, because we're all interconnected, we know this, very awful, difficult things are being perpetrated by human beings. And what to speak of what Mother Earth herself has begun to do in terms of droughts and tornadoes and all kinds of other things. There's just this dissonance, this dis-ease, politically, socially, environmentally. The icebergs are melting, all that stuff. Simultaneously, and I've lived long enough now to really have watched an enormous shift, there's just this waking up, this realization that we're not the helpless victims of some strange reality, but we are in the driver's seat, or at least we want to be, and we feel that we could be. And this vision of what life could be within our own selves, within our own families, our country, our planet, we're the longing for that is becoming stronger. We're not as content just to, be born, live our little lives, die, and just have it go on and on and on. It's the advent of technology that has suddenly simply dissolved time and space. I'm commenting about this film being up on the YouTube channel. For the last so many years, I've been putting up all the talks that I do wherever I do them in the world. How all of you will watch this here, and really, to my astonishment, a month from now, there'll be many hundreds of people probably who will have watched it from all over the place. And whenever I travel now, if it's a place that I have some connection with, people will come up and say, "Oh, I know you, I've been watching." It's terrible, actually, because I used to be able to tell the same jokes in different places. But now, if I told it yesterday, almost anywhere, somebody knows it. When I talk about my life, they ask about, how's the leak in your roof? How's the project you're working on? And it's like I have to stop for a minute. How did you know that? Well, because of all of this. And this is the good news. But the other side of that is everything we do affects everything else now. And now we begin to know this. I mean, we buy apples from New Zealand in America, and we buy grapes from America in New Zealand. Just, somebody came home with the grapes, and, these grapes are grown a few 100 miles from my house. What am I doing eating these grapes here? But this is the way it's all working. But what's also happening, you see, is this universal understanding of some other potential, of who and what we really are. And that is like a global thought also. And it's not merely that it's a global thought, but what we're capturing is this feeling that there is this completely other power that is our real nature. Now, I myself am a disciple of a line of gurus. I'm a devotee in that I with wild enthusiasm, embrace the idea of God and Divine Mother and all the different ways that you want to say that. I don't carefully couch my inner life, so that I'm not really acknowledging anybody but myself. I'm very comfortable with that. You don't have to be as comfortable with that. It's not by any means required. But however you think about it, we're beginning to realize that this little thing that we carry around, that we call ourselves, is part of a much bigger web. It's like a long tapestry that you might see on the wall. And the thread goes from one end to the other. And even if you're just this little square, this little incarnation, this little part, if you cut anything about your little part, you've cut it. You've broken it from end to end and from top to bottom. And Paramahansa Yogananda, whom you may recognize at the end there to my left, he talks about, in the most fascinating ways, just dissonance here creates dissonance there, goodness here creates goodness here, just spinning all around the globe. He actually said when he chanted Om, I won't flatter myself, and maybe I'll flatter you to say it, but when he chanted Om, as we just did, and Om is the link between the spirit world and the physical world. It's basically the transition. It's a very subtle point that we can talk about more, but it's the transition zone between matter, energy, and spirit. He said when he would chant Om, and you can hear recordings, we don't have any here, but you can find them. He would chant that sound, and he said the vibration of that would instantly go throughout the world. And there were instances where people who were in tune with him hundreds of miles from where he was doing something could hear it. Because through his consciousness, he was dissolving the barriers of time and space. We're doing it with technology now. I carry my little Apple computer everywhere, and the first thing as I do is I check in to see what's going on everywhere that I'm connected. I can't just do it with my mind. But every once in a while, for all of us, it breaks through, doesn't it? And we just feel and know something that we have no rational connection to. Well, once we start talking about our divine healing energies, what we're really talking about, just even in the concept of healing, is that we're making the right connections. We're just reconnecting that which somehow, some part of us knows should be connected, but somehow got broken. Whether we're just talking about our internal selves, just the physical body itself, the lungs are supposed to do something, and the kidneys and the liver, everything is supposed to do something. And when it works right together, it all works, doesn't it? Everybody talks to each other just like they're supposed to talk to each other. I have been extremely fortunate in the body that I inhabit. It's served me very well, and it continues to serve me very well, and I thank it on a regular basis. But I have some little anomaly where one of my glands, this is the way my healer tells me about it, my doctor tells me about it, is that my brain thinks one thing is going on and my gland thinks something else is going on. She doesn't really quite know which end of it to fix, because it's not really broken, but my brain thinks it's broken. So there's just like somewhere in there, that which should be woven together, there's been a little snap in it. So when you really think about healing, what we're really talking about is restoring. We're trying to restore wholeness. And if we think about healing in ourselves, we have a relationship that somehow we have an intuition that it's supposed to be whole. But it doesn't behave in a whole manner. It's got a break in it. Maybe it's a break from when we were born. Maybe it's a break that came into it somewhere. But here's another part of where healing is very important to understand. If we were meant to be broken, if our bodies were meant to break, if our hearts were meant to break, we would accept it much more easily. You know? It's like, I don't go around thinking I should be as tall as Brian. Brian is real tall. And he's very convenient to have someone so tall because he can reach all sorts of things. But I don't walk around thinking that I should be tall like that. I feel just the right size. In fact, I got into this funny moment, just as my mind at least is odd. I won't say all of yours are, but my mind is odd. Actually, as it happens, Brian's uncle is a very good friend of mine, and he's a really big man. And he was helping me move. He was helping my brother move. So we were there, and we were just crawling around on the floor and all this. And, you know, when a person is big, they're big all the way through. Their feet, their toes. What really struck me about him is that his knees were just immensely large. And I became idiotically just confused by the mere size, you know. And I started just making a lot of noise around every big man that I knew, just about how big they were. Finally, one of my large friends just said to me, just like this, "Asha, it's the right size for my consciousness." He said just like that. And I thought, exactly. We make our physical forms to be a vehicle for who we're trying to be in this world. And it's the right form for us. You know, I don't think that I ought to be a porpoise or a whale or a Great Dane or anything, or one of those tui birds. Tui, you know, a little puffy thing. We've been watching the tui birds. There's this one tui bird. He was the punk tui bird. You've probably seen them. He just puffed out all his hair like he had gel all over it, and then just did this rap song. It was apparently, he was trying to attract this lady tui over here, and I think it succeeded. You know, but nothing about me thinks I ought to be him. But when my heart hurts, and when my body doesn't function, that's wrong. I can tell that's not how it's meant to be. And this is a divine message for us. When we're sad, that's not how we're meant to be. And we do all kinds of things to ease that sadness. You know, we distract ourselves endlessly. We try to make sure that never for a moment are we alone with our thoughts. No. You know, even in the bathroom, something has to be playing, the telephone has to be there, there's a magazine, you know, just like never for a moment, never be alone with your thoughts. That's basically our motto in a present-day society. And if possible, have what's distracting us be so loud that we can't even think. just blasts through us, just the sound like that all the time. So we try to escape, or we try to just go to sleep, and drugs, alcohol, television, sugar, all of it's there. We can just go to sleep. But what's really trying to happen is we're trying to escape, but the problem with trying to escape is it doesn't work. Because after all of it is over, after all of it settles down, whatever is not right within us, we're still pushing against it. And we're moving, as a planet, the planet itself, I think, is going to get sicker before it gets well. But part of what's going to make it well is all this awakening. And this idea that I'm here, and a lot of people say it, I feel that I'm here to be a healer. And I think we have to think about, what does that really mean? And for some people, it takes a very specific form. I'm supposed to go to this medical college. I'm supposed to learn this modality. But I think what all of us are trying to say when you have that thought is, I'm meant to be what I'm meant to be. I'm meant to be part of light. I'm meant to be part of joy. I'm meant to be part of wholeness. And I think that is the most important impulse that is going through our planet right now. And everyone, I think, needs to get engaged in that. We just need to get engaged in it in the right way. And there are certain just thoughts and questions that I think we have to ask ourselves. The first is, what is our intention? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Because sometimes we want to do something, we don't even understand why. And I think that it's always twofold, and it's very difficult to really parse it apart. When I was younger, I came onto the path of self-realization when I was 18 years old, which is really just about as soon as a person can begin to think for themselves, at least in my case. But I desired something like that even earlier. So as soon as the idea of meditation and self-realization and my destiny was in my own hands, that's my definition of self-realization, is that I am responsible for my own destiny. That doesn't mean that I live without connection to the universe, but I am responsible for my relationship with the greater reality. And there's better and worse ways to do that. And when I was 18, I was told some of the good ways to do that, meditation being one of them, selfless service being another. But all the time before that, I had two just compelling needs in my life that nobody would help me with. And one was, I felt that I was born to be happy. And the odd thing was, I wasn't unhappy. In fact, as lives go, I was very gifted in my upbringing and my parents and the opportunities they gave me. I didn't even know people had horrific childhoods. It just never crossed my mind till I was into college. And so everything just came just fine. And it was almost, and this I gradually learned is actually a principle of self-realization. Even tragedy kind of keeps you engaged. But when everything just assumes what Yogananda calls in his book, the anguishing monotony of it, which is, there's nothing wrong, but this can't be all there is. And I remember being 10 years old, and in the picture window of the house at 3809 Hillcrest Avenue, El Paso, Texas. And I was looking out there, and I looked to that house, and the man was mowing his lawn. I was 10, he was mowing his lawn. And I thought to myself, this can't be it. This just cannot be the apex of life. And I remember sort of staring at that man mowing his lawn with this sense that there was some vibrating reality behind him. Now I can give you enormous philosophical, even the physicists will talk to you all about it. But I was just a kid with this, there's got to be something behind this. And I never could see it. And it was only when great authorities told me it was there that I began to be able to understand. But I wanted to be happy because I felt somehow that if I wasn't, I was off. I was off from my purpose, you might almost say. And the second thing is I wanted to help other people be happy. But the darn problem was that if I didn't know how to be happy, how could I help them? And those two forces were just at war inside of me. Now, the word healer never crossed my mind because in those days, people weren't thinking like that. They weren't thinking that things that have aberrated and need to be restored, which is what we're talking about with healing. But that was, of course, what it was. But I understood, and this, of course, this is what I was saying, the question of intention. Like, why do I want this? And I was honest enough, and I think it's very important for all of us to understand, if we're going to really be helpful to other people, that we're part of the equation. That we have to see ourselves not as more important than anyone else, but also not as less. That we are all, if you stand back from it and you look at the tapestry, we're all the warp and the woof, and it just makes the picture. And no, nothing is more important than anything else, but that also includes us. That our own necessity. Swami Kriyananda, when he was talking once to a group of us who were all in positions of responsibility within the Ananda network, and he said something. He said, when you have to make a decision, in regard to the work that you're doing or the other people, he said, you must always take yourself into account. And this is what he meant by that. He said, for example, if the situation requires a stern response, but a stern response would not be wholesome for you personally. That sternness is something that you need to avoid and you need to be charitable. He said, be charitable, that's the right decision. It's presumptuous, he said, not to take yourself into account. So I think one of the things we have to do if we're thinking about our own healing energy is we have to realize that I'm part of the equation. I'm learning something here. I'm doing this because I too need something, but that doesn't mean I have nothing to give. Sometimes we think that we have nothing to give until we have everything to give. But the really fun thing about life is that we're all lined up. And you're looking this way, and the one who's a little taller than you is helping you, and you're looking this way, and the one who's about to step where you're standing is the one that you can help. And you can always work from both sides of it. And I'm talking in a moment, what is our source? We also have to be drawing from those who know more than we do in many different ways. But we have to understand, I'm doing this because I too have something to learn. In the position of leadership that I've been in for so long, I get marvelously insulted by people on a regular basis because whoever is in a position of authority is the biggest target. And so when people are not happy, they'll go after you. We joke about it, all leaders, we would just wear this t-shirt with a big bullseye on it. And it's just part of what we do. And so this one man came to me once and he basically gave a very, he'd stored it up. He gave a very long list of all the things that I was doing wrong. And he was right, he was correct in his analysis of my foibles. And they were just marvelous. It was just one of those really wonderful moments, He said, you can help people to a certain extent, but then you just hit the wall and you can't do anything for them. He said to me, I said, yeah, But my answer finally, that was among other things. Another man said to me one day, other people think you're inspiring, but I really don't find you at all inspiring, he said. He lived in our community and I had to say to him, oh, you poor man, I talk all the time. It must be just terrible for you. I mean, all I could think of was this incredible compassion. He'd just been sitting there, week after week, day after day, having to listen to me. But this other man, whatever he said, I said to him, do you think I would still be doing this job if I knew how to do it? If I had perfected the responsibilities I'd been given, I wouldn't have to do it anymore. Because there would be no reason for me to keep on doing it. Obviously, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm not finished. I haven't, if you want to use the word, I haven't healed myself. Even this that I'm doing now, I've been thinking about this lately. I've been doing this work since whenever, the 70s. And recently I've been traveling a lot more and just, this is all that I do. And I just wondered, the other day it crossed my mind, I may not have to do this forever. This is such a self-definition that I just go everywhere and tell everyone what Swami Kriyananda told me. That's all I'm doing here. And he told me so much that I have to talk all the time. But it occurred to me one day that maybe I don't have to do this forever. You know, whatever it is that it's doing for me, which I feel it, I can tell, and I'm endlessly grateful. I feel completely privileged to have had the life I've had, but you know, maybe it's going to finish at some point. And my intention is, my primary intention is gratitude. That which has been given to me must be passed on. Swami Kriyananda was once asked, are you a happy man? He was asked toward the end of his life when he was in his 80s. He died a year and a half ago at the age of 86. And someone said, are you a happy man? He said, well, on another occasion, he said, many people say they're happy because nobody likes to admit that they're not. But he said, the real test of happiness is, the nature of true happiness is that you want to make everyone in the world as happy as you are. And if you really think about that, that's true, isn't it? But nobody but the saints and masters really believe that they have found that kind of happiness. And Swamiji said, by that definition, I'm a very happy man, because he spent every minute of his life just giving it back. So part of what we need to do if we're really going to heal people is we have to have the right intention. We have to really sincerely and deeply desire that something beautiful can happen. And understand that in trying to make something beautiful happen for others, we're also trying to make something beautiful happen for ourselves, because we're all in this together. And we also have to realize that we're not here to tell people something we don't already know. I've personally never had much anxiety about standing up and talking. I don't think I actually came out of my mother's womb and started a conversation, but it was real close to that. You know, it's just words and me are the same thing. But I've had to help a lot of my friends who feel less comfortable standing in front and sharing. But the reason I'm not uncomfortable is, a number of things, which is I never go beyond what I know. You never go beyond what you know. And our intention, when we're trying to be healers, it's very, very important. I'm not here to tell people something that I don't know. I'm just here to take whatever it is that I do know and find those who don't yet know it and give it to them, whether you're doing as I'm doing and sharing ideas, or whether you're passing over energy, something that they need. You know, whether it's a massage or an acupuncture treatment or Reiki or intuitive counseling or whatever flow, or just mere friendship. You know, we're all in a position to add wholeness to this planet at every single minute. And we're all in a position to fracture this planet at every single minute. And one of the things, that's again why I say healing is about your intention. I'm here to create wholeness. Now we also have to understand, and this is the second thought, we have to have the right intention, we have to have the right attitude. Part of the right attitude is, I'm just sharing what I know with people with friends, with people I like, and to people who fundamentally like me. Why would they not? You know, just that simple thought, why would they not? If I love them, they'll love me. But the attitude we have can't be that. It can't be, oh, here I am, it's all about me. Having the right attitude about ourselves, which is what I was saying a little while ago, that we're very important in this, but not more important than anyone else. We're just all hanging out here together. And we're all sort of moving through this really quite remarkable incarnation that we're all sharing. And where each one of us is just incrementally trying to find that right place. So we have to have this attitude, this very deep attitude of respect and humility for everybody that we're involved in. I have a lot of energy. I'm a very organized person, and I'm very good with other people's crises. You know, I'm just really good. When somebody else is in a big crisis, I get incredibly calm, and I get very efficient. I can sort of move through their worlds, and because my body works well, I have a lot of energy. You need carrot juice, I'll make you carrot juice. You need rides to the doctor, I'll take you to the doctor. You know, you need somebody to go pick up your grandmother, I'll go pick up your grandmother. You know, just that kind of like, I can organize your life and make your life better than you can make your life work. And because I've been in a position of responsibility and involvement in community for so many years, I spend a lot of time running other people's lives. It's the only way I can think about it. And it really came to a crescendo when my parents began to decline. My parents died maybe a decade ago, maybe 12 years from my mother. My mother had Parkinson's for 15 years, which is tough karma. And then at the end, my dad had just basically, he was really tired of my mother's suffering, so he took a little holiday for the last few years. He took a mental holiday. He just decided to just go into another place where he didn't really quite remember what was going on. He went in a wonderful way. He went really sweet in his heart. But his very, very keen mind just didn't function that well anymore. He just took a little vacation. I mean, it didn't upset me for many reasons. He was just taking a vacation. He'd had enough. But that was tough, and I ended up being more responsible than I expected to be, even though I lived about 200 miles away from them. So I had to almost manage their care from 200 miles away. And so when it first started, which would now be some 20 years ago, I just rushed in there and started running their lives. I had the story. I had it all worked out. I knew everything they needed, and it did not work very well. I don't know how many of you have elderly parents, but elderly parents generally are not just waiting for their children to take over their lives. At least certainly not mine. They have this really, really persistent idea that it's their life, not yours. And I ran around in circles doing all these things that they didn't want me to do. And there was something so wrong with this picture. Karma is very interesting. What usually happens to us, and it's interesting to watch, is that a characteristic of ours has to be pushed really far. It has to become extreme enough for us to actually notice it. That's how I put it. I have certain deep-seated character flaws that were absolutely made much worse by the family I was born into. They just facilitated my faults with terrific skill. And when I learned about reincarnation later and about the fact that we choose our families and so on, I thought to myself, what a moron you were. Why didn't you pick a family that would fix you instead of making you worse? But I began to figure it out. Because until, if I can say this properly, until the imagined misery of changing yourself looks like less than the misery of staying as you are, you won't change. We only change when we're just absolutely disgusted with our own qualities. Otherwise, we just hold on to them because it's the known misery. We prefer the known misery to the possibility. So I was born into a family, and I've seen this as a pattern, where all my faults just had to get worse and worse until finally I noticed. Because otherwise it's just the way we are. And we think it's normal. That's the cutest thing about being a human being, is that everybody, well, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, everyone thinks their watch is right. Now we all have cell phones and they all say the same thing. It's no fun anymore. You used to get to argue about whose watch was right. Right? But I was running around making my parents' life work according to how I thought it should work. And several things occurred to me, and you would think they would have occurred to me sooner. One was, they are separate people. It may be my mom and dad, but they, they've had a really big life all on their own. And I was a part of it, but I'm definitely not the definition of it. And they have separate bodies, they have separate souls, they have separate destinies, they have their own karma, they have their own brains, they have their own opinions. I mean, all that sounds so ridiculous, but I was actually just behaving as if they didn't. We have an educational system through Ananda. It's called Education for Life. Our schools are called Living Wisdom Schools. Brian is both a graduate and a teacher in those schools, if you're interested in any of that. But the definition of true education, as Swami Kriyananda put it, true maturity, that the purpose of education is to develop true maturity. True maturity is the ability to relate to realities other than your own. And so just looking at my parents and realizing, oh, their reality is completely different than mine. And I also realized they were by then, at least in their 70s, and maybe in their 80s, that my parents had been working their way up to being 75 and 80 years old. They'd been doing that since they were born. They had made a whole series of decisions in their lives that had formed exactly into the karma of the exact moment. And of course, I had been making a whole different series of decisions, and so my life over here, even when I get to be 80, is going to be very different than theirs. But all I was doing was trying to make their reality match what I thought it should be. And I was terribly embarrassed to realize how little I had stopped to actually stand inside of their consciousness and try to feel it from their point of view. And even less had I done what I teach other people to do, which is to actually say really deeply, what does your soul want from this experience? What is your superconscious trying to communicate with you from this experience? And I started thinking, how can I help you grow in your way toward your highest potential? And I also realized how extremely disrespectful I was being of them and many people in my life. I've worked very hard to have at least theoretical courage. I've been tested some. I presume I will be tested more to face whatever karma God sends me, whatever karma I've created. If it comes to me, I'm going to assume it's mine. And of course I'm going to assume it's mine. I'm also going to believe that if God challenges me, He will also give me the strength to meet the challenge. And that somewhere in the great web of things, my soul decided this was going to be a good idea. And my superconscious decided I had enough energy to deal with it. And even if I may not be able to go through with flying colors standing up, at least I can slither forward and not give up entirely. Why wouldn't other people have that same destiny? And I just suddenly turned around completely with my parents, and instead of trying to make their life be what I thought it was, I started literally praying to their superconscious, what do you want? And what do you want from me? Instead of, this is what I want to give you, what do you want from me? And everything just became so much easier and happier and positive in every possible way. What is our attitude toward what we're doing? We have to have an attitude of enormous respect and an attitude of great confidence that even if in this incarnation maybe it's not going to all work out great, but your soul is made of the same stuff as mine. And if we're talking about divine healing, that's what we have to be working with. I mean, it's nice if you can make a body better, but really what we're trying to heal is lack of faith, lack of courage, lack of willingness to do the needful. This is what real healing is. Everything else is just a symptom. And we don't want to just be masking symptoms. We want real victory there. And sometimes death happens. Just sometimes death happens. Doctors... well, I saw this documentary, it was marvelous. It was physicians talking about how completely goofy their own profession is because of the way people think that doctors can keep you from dying. And this one doctor said, there's a certain point in treatment, he said, when I really just want to get the patients in the room and say, you're mortal, get over it. Just like that. And there's a certain point in all healing where we just have to say, you're mortal. It's not gonna come out exactly as you hope. And that doesn't just mean that the physical body will die. It also means that many of our dreams will not be fulfilled. And that our job as healers is not necessarily to make it all right. It's to give people the courage and the wisdom and the understanding and the devotion to a greater reality and the sense of belonging to a bigger whole to be able to deal with it. And so our attitude has to be one of great optimism, great positive energy, great faith. There's an expression in India, even one moment in the company of a saint can be your raft over the ocean of delusion. That's the idea of getting off the wheel of samsara, however you want to say that. And it's a beautiful, and it causes holy people in India to be absolutely besieged by people trying to spend a moment in their company to get the free ride over the ocean of delusion. And it's a true aphorism, but it's for a very different reason, because I had so many years with Swami Kriyananda who, as far as I could tell, really lived in a different dimension. And he had this belief in everybody, partly because he wasn't worried about time. And the belief was his own attitude toward himself was that he understood himself to be part of a greater reality, and he understood that in the end, it always has a happy ending. I've come to a very simple description of why I believe in God, or what it means to me to believe in God. That the story has a happy ending, and if you haven't reached the happy ending, you are not at the end of the story. This leads to reincarnation and all sorts of other things. But as a healer, you must have that attitude. There is a happy ending to this, whatever that is. And what I was saying about Swami Kriyananda is that he just saw us. I remember one evening in the very early years of our community, Ananda, if you come tomorrow night, you'll see it's now 1,000 acres and several hundred people, the original Ananda community. We now have 8 others in the world, but there was a time when that community all fit into a room smaller than this. And the room smaller than this was one of the biggest and nicest buildings we had. But Swami Kriyananda was giving us an evening, a satsang there. And we just moved into a real altered zone. And he said at the end of it, first he said, if you could see yourselves, the way I see you, you would just see all this beautiful light. And then he said, you're going to get it right sooner or later. He said, why waste a few million incarnations like that? Why not now? But nonetheless, when he looked at us, what he saw was that divine potential. And yes, it might have to go through some more ups and downs before it figured it out. But the confidence that he had in our and my potential was completely transforming to me. It was impossible not to believe in myself when he believed in me. He had a habit that was so sweet, we all just loved it. Every time he would see anybody, he would say, good morning, great soul, like that. Great soul? Who are you looking at, But that has to be the attitude. If you're really going to heal people, you have to deeply believe in their profound, inescapable goodness. And you have to deeply believe in the happy ending, even if it's not going to happen yet, even if it's not going to happen in that identity. I was speaking, there's a friend of mine, a very dear, beautiful woman, who died in her 50s of breast cancer, metastasized breast cancer. And the day that she found out that there was nothing more they could do for her, she outlived their predictions by quite a few years. She had a young daughter, and she was determined that she was not going to go until that daughter was of a certain age, and she held on. The day she found out that there was nothing more the doctors could do for her, just intuitively I went to see her. She lived at a distance, but I just drove up. I pulled into her driveway just scarcely 30 minutes after the doctors had told her it was over. She was the family was very well-to-do, beautiful home. She was very magnificent in her home and all of that. And she just looked at me and she said, how am I going to let go of all of this? She points to her handsome husband and her beautiful children, and she's just crying, I'm crying, what can we do? I mean, it was terrible. Your heart breaks in this world a lot of times. I'm sure you all have your stories. And there it was. But if it wasn't the happy ending, it wasn't the end of the story. I knew that. And I believed in that so profoundly, that God never sends us a test greater than we can handle. As Mother Teresa of Calcutta said, sometimes I wish he didn't trust me so much, but there it is. And I knew that if God was taking her out of this world, there was a reason for it, even if I didn't know what it was, and I wasn't going to give her platitudes. That would have just been so rude at that point. I said, you have a wall of fire to go through. You have a river of tears. But on the other side of it, there'll be light. Because there always is. Think about our own lives. In the area that I lived in Palo Alto, California, it's the home of Apple and Facebook and Google and Yahoo and all these different things. And Steve Jobs, who founded Apple Computer, died relatively prematurely, as they say. And it was a very well publicized and huge event in our area. And interestingly, at his funeral, he gave every single person who came a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi, because it was the most influential book in his life. Isn't that interesting? We just don't know what's going on this planet. He never stepped inside our temple, which was 1.5 miles from his home, and he knew fully well it was there, but that book held him. So everybody has their own way of expressing it. But his death was well publicized, and he had a beautiful family, beautiful wife, all the money in the world, everything. And when literally his last words, suddenly his wife says, he was looking somewhere that none of us could see, and he said, wow, oh wow, wow, just like that, and then he died. Isn't that just, like, what was he seeing? But they could all tell that he saw something that they couldn't see. Because nothing happens in this world except to take us where we're really trying to go, which is to heal. And the mere fact that the body is shed, the body is always shed. Nobody's body is going to last forever. You can certainly ease someone's journey if you have that kind of power, if you have that knowledge and power. By all means, do it. But don't. Your attitude must be, I'm here to help you with the real journey. And the real journey is the courage to face and deal with whatever he sends, whatever God sends. So I'm here with my friend, a river of tears and a wall of fire. I can't say anything else. I said, but on the other side of it is light. And it was tough. And then finally she really was fading. I was away and I got a call, and I drove home in the middle of the night from 200 miles away just to be there with her. And I got there before she was unconscious. And she said, you were right. Just like that, you were right. And then she just said goodbye to all of it, because it was the right time. Just like my big man friend said, this body is the right size for my consciousness. She knew that letting go of that body was the right move for her consciousness at that point. So we can help people so much just by having the attitude of belief in their ability to go through it, whatever it might be. And then be their friend, not my friend. I'm going to do this for you. But what is your soul really trying to do? And let me move with you. You know how it is? I'm sure you have friends. I pray you have friends like this. I have a few friends in I have a lot of friends, but one woman in particular, she has this quality, like, I don't know, beyond anybody I know. She just accepts and believes in you. And she and I have been friends for many years, and our personalities are so diverse. Our friendship is so peculiar. But I know my side of it. My side of it is she just accepts and believes in me. And it's not like she doesn't know that I'm really odd. And I'm so different than her that I've done so many things that she just looks at me like, how could you ever think that was a good idea? That was the craziest thing I can imagine. And I see from her point of view, in fact, it was. But that still doesn't touch just this deep one moment in the company of a saint who really feels us. And that's the attitude we have to have. I'm here to help your soul on its journey, whatever that journey may be, and I'm not afraid. That above all, what we have to be is not afraid. That's what I realized when I was running around for my parents. I was so afraid. I was so afraid that they were going to have to live out their own karma. Now, how are you going to go with that? You're afraid that people are going to live out their own karma. You're afraid that they're going to suffer. You're afraid that they're going to die. You're afraid that they're not going to get it right. And so you're frantically, fear doesn't help anything. There was a movement in California at one point. It was a big anti-nuclear war movement. I mean, like, duh, like, let's be against nuclear war. That's a really good idea, isn't it? that's the strange planet we live on right now, that a whole bunch of them are going one way toward that sort of thing, and the rest of us are saying, hello, this is really a bad idea. So these people, with great sincerity and real intelligence, they worked at it really hard. They were campaigning against nuclear war. I think it was an initiative on the California state ballot, I'm not sure. So they came and they wanted Swami Kriyananda and Ananda to put its weight behind this movement. We're non-political as a rule, because that's not the world. That's not where the solutions lie. I'm very political because I know that it's all about consciousness, so I devote myself to helping people change their consciousness, and then politics will take care of itself. That's my point of view. But this person makes this presentation, and it was like on a board, and they had all these charts, and it was, here's Washington, D.C., or Los Angeles, California, or San Francisco, and the bomb of so many dimensions, however you measure those things, is going to land here, and these 100,000 people will all be vaporized, no trace of them will be left, and then these people will all turn to ash, and then these people will all die a miserable death a couple of weeks later, and it was gruesome and true, and could well happen. It was horrible, but it was well done. Swami listened very attentively, and those of us who were sitting there were very curious as to what he would say. First, he commended them on their good intentions, then he commended them on the excellence of their presentation, and then he said, but if your goal is peace, fear is not the right tactic. Just as simple as that. What is your vibration? Because what your vibration is really what you're putting forward. And then he said, 100 years from now, almost no one who's on the planet now is still going to be on the planet. And then he said, so whether we dribble out over the next century, a few at a time, or all go out together, he said, once we leave our bodies and are in the astral world, it doesn't make any difference. In other words, death is not anything. Death is just the next step. Because at a certain point, this body no longer serves our consciousness. Consciousness endures, matter does not. And so the more fearless we can be about the nature of this journey, fear really confuses your mind. Really, really confuses your mind. And almost always, if you're feeling agitated and confused, ask yourself the question, what am I afraid of? And, when I was so agitated and confused about my parents, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of their karma. I'm afraid that they won't be able to cope with their own lives. And that was when I said, whoa, this attitude is really, really disrespectful. And how can you heal anybody if you don't even respect them? How can you bring wholeness if there's no respect? And, you might have to respect. Once Yogananda was in a discussion with a very narrow-minded Christian, and they were having an argument about eternal hell or something like that. And it was hopeless. Yogananda saw that it was completely hopeless. And he took off his hat and he sort of bowed at him like this. And he said, I bow to the colossal temple of ignorance I see in front of me. And then he just put his hat back on. Because to be respectful does not mean you have to be stupid. I respect your right to be just so incredibly pig-headed and wrong. But nonetheless, I have faith that if it isn't a happy ending, it's not the actual ending yet. And so we have to also see the more courageous we can be, and that has to do with you have to be calm in the face of other people's suffering. You have to have an attitude of calm in the face of other people's suffering, because to jump in the pool and drown with them is just not going to help, is it? That doesn't mean you have to be calmly accepting of it, but you have to be calm. In fact, you can exert tremendous power, but the power that you have to exert has to be done in the right way, not to dominate, but to empower and uplift. One of the ways that Yogananda teaches us to pray is you don't pray for outcome. I mean, sometimes we're very tempted to pray for outcome, but it's a little dicey to pray for outcome, specific outcome, because you really are not sure which is, it's hard to be sure which outcome is really going to help. So what you want to pray is that whoever you're helping is going to be filled with light. Because if they're filled with light, they'll know what to do with it. And sometimes what they do with it is they go farther down because they haven't hit bottom yet. But what you need to see is that you need to see them, and this is what I began to pray for my parents. This is how I changed it. I was not at peace with many things that were going on, so I prayed to God and Guru and to Divine Mother. You've got to help them learn whatever it is you're trying to teach them. And that's how I use my strength. Not to change the circumstances, but to try to infuse them with the capacity to learn whatever it is they were trying to learn. I had this ridiculous encounter with my father toward the end. I was trying to urge upon him some action I thought was the right action, like this, and I tried to reason with him by saying, "Dad, don't you want to just keep growing and learning?" He looked at me like this. "No," he said, just like that. "No." He said, essentially, "I've had enough. I'm just going to try to get through to the end now." I thought, oh my word, here I am, following a whole path that isn't even his. What he just wanted was to be sweet and to be happy. And I just started just trying to make him be sweet and make him happy. And that took him down his path so much better. It reminded him of joy. And when he breathed his last, I was sitting there with him with my sister and brother. When his last breath went out of him, and this huge sound went out, I felt a rising sense of joy that was, I've rarely experienced anything like that. And I had to think, it was a victorious life, however I called it. And the last few years, he still knew my name, but he didn't know anything much. But it was a victorious life. That reminds us always, it's a victorious life if the person just perseveres and holds on, does the best they can. And that's what we have to believe in. Well, any comments or thoughts before we have a little music, before we call it a night?
Home is a green hill, home is a wind, blowing betrayal far, far away. Home is the knowledge heaven is near, home's the end of the fray. Home is my heart's land, home's where I am. Nothing can dim the light of my soul. Home is forever, home is today. Home's a heart that is whole. Often I dream that life is a play, laughter forever and skies never gray. But when I'm silent, freed from all care, I discover my home's everywhere. Home is a green hill, home is a wind, blowing betrayal far, far away. Home is the knowledge heaven is near, home's the end of the fray. Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee, all our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasure, all our melody. Make us each a channel of Thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow Thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share Thy love. Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, All our lives we dedicate to Thee, all our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasure, all our melody. Make us each a channel of Thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow Thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share Thy love.